Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. Jamaica has there are renewed calls this afternoon for more to be done to protect the homeless against acts of violence in Jamaica. This following the deadly attack on 6 homeless men in the corporate area recently, and we'll take that again. Jamaica has recorded more than 100 murders in the 28 days since the start of the year. As at January 26, there were 104 murders compared to 94 during the same period last year. Now, the Kingston West Police Division, which has seen a spike in gang violence, has recorded 15 murders, this up from 2 during the same period last year. Now, there have been 18 murders in St. James. Now, 4 murders are reported during the same period last year. Now, the police data also shows an 11% spike in shootings. A man is now in police custody in connection with the death of a Canadian woman in Runaway Bay, St. Ann last week. He was listed by investigators as a person of interest earlier this week. Meanwhile, the St. Ann police are raising other concerns: the number of rape cases in the parish. Shamila Pullen has that story.
The latest rape incident in St. Ann is that of 43-year-old Latoya Alcindor, a Canadian woman who went missing. Miss Alcindor's body was found at an apartment complex last week Thursday afternoon. A man has been taken into custody in connection with her death.
A Canadian national, and I just want to inform at this juncture that we are making steady progress with that one, and we will be leveling some charge in the Canadian incident before the week concludes.
But that's not the only case. Persons in the parish have been raising concerns about the number of women who have been kidnapped and raped in recent times. In a voice note circulating on social media, a woman was heard talking about someone she knows well who was also raped. She said this is especially happening in the Ocherius area. Head of the St. Ann Police, Superintendent Dwight Powell, says he's aware of the situation and his office has been getting the reports.
So far, I must report that since the start of this year, since January 1st to date, we have on record 5 reported cases of rape for the St. Ann Division. Three of these cases happened in the Ocherius police area.
He says investigators are also trying to make a link between the case involving the Canadian woman and other reported cases in the parish.
A young lady was abducted from the Ocherius area and taken elsewhere, where it is alleged that she was assaulted sexually. We are presently probing that incident. The other 2 incidents that is being probed in Ocherius, we are also looking to see if there's any nexus at all between these 3 incidents. So far, there's no indication that any of the 3 are connected.
Superintendent Powell is calling on the public to give the police whatever information they have on these cases. Shamila Pullen, TVJ News.
A man who was detained by police following Saturday's crash landing by a twin-engine plane in Rocky Point, Clarendon, has been released by the police. The man's attorney, Ian Wilkinson, confirmed Wednesday that he was released.
My client was arrested on Sunday, apparently in relation to the incident regarding the plane that crash landed at Rocky Point in Clarendon. He was detained for 4 days, and we had an interview, what lawyers call a question and answer session this afternoon, and he was released without charge.
And Mr. Wilkinson outlined the next move for his client now that he has been released.
Well, I encourage the police to release him because based on my instructions and based on what I was told by the relevant police personnel, there was not sufficient evidence to charge my client with anything. And in terms of what my client will do going forward, that is a matter in which I have to take further instruction.
The Jamaica Defence Force officer accused of misconduct involving a female junior soldier has resigned. The scandal related to an intimate relationship between the officer and the female soldier. Now, Chief of Defence Staff Lieutenant General Rocky Meade says both parties were charged under sections of the Defence Act and for contravening the JDF's personal relationship and fraternization policy.
It is important to note that there was no allegation of sexual harassment made by either party, and therefore no charges were laid for any breach of the JDF sexual harassment policy. Having concluded the case, both the officer and the female soldier were tried by the appropriate superior authority and the commanding officer respectively. Both were found guilty. The officer was awarded the maximum fine available under the Defence Act for an ASA. He has tendered his resignation, which I accepted and forwarded to the Defence Board.
The JDF leadership had been criticized for its handling of the matter after it was reported that the female private was charged and sent to military prison for 14 days, while no action had been taken against her senior. General Meade says both parties were charged at the same time. However, he says there are different processes for dealing with soldiers at different ranks.
The commanding officer can treat with persons who are not warrant officers or officers. They can treat with, NCOs and private. And the process for doing that is a more straightforward process. While the officers have to be treated by what we call the appropriate superior authority, and the information has to be prepared in a particular way as outlined by the Defence Act.
Member of Parliament for East Rural St. Andrew, Juliet Holness, says approval has now been granted for work to start on the Gordontown Main Road. The road was damaged in November due to heavy rains. Residents of Mavis Bank and surrounding communities protested recently about the pace at which the authorities were moving to fix the breakaway.
The 28th of January, in record time, all the equipment will be rolling in and the labor is going to start our wall at Gordontown, and we are elated.
She was speaking at the opening of a new Pizza Hut location in her constituency on Wednesday. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. To the latest on the coronavirus, now the country recorded 194 new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday. This has pushed the total number of cases to 15,435. St. James recorded most of the cases, followed by Kingston and St. Andrew, Manchester and St. Elizabeth. Meanwhile, 2 more persons have died from the illness. The country's COVID-19 death toll is now 344. 94 persons have been hospitalized with the illness. 12 are in critical condition. Wear your mask, sanitize and maintain physical distancing. The guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health to help curb the spread of COVID-19. But despite repeated calls, people continue to flout the measures. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says he's taking note.
One of the patterns that I see, I've been observing, is that people start to identify me as the COVID police. Because every time I turn up and I look ahead of me, I see people reach in their pockets for the mask. So they have the mask, but they're not wearing it. And when they see you coming, they start to pull the mask, put it on, pull it up from under their chin, over their noses, and that sort of thing.
Monday, the government announced tighter curfew restrictions in Manchester as a result of the increase in COVID-19 cases covering 30 communities in the parish.
The reality is you're not doing us any favors by wearing the mask. The favor is to yourself, and indeed it's that duty to yourself. So don't play hide and seek with wearing the mask, because that's not going to help us in these times.
And as the country continues to grapple with the virus, fear is heightening among some of the most vulnerable groups. The health minister is renewing his call for people to act responsibly.
We have to ensure that we have to recognize that it's really about us. And we can't do it when we think people looking on and not do it when we think we're not being scrutinized. Because all that means is that we're allowing COVID to get the better of us.
Sections of the South Coast Highway in Manchester remain blocked for a third straight day. Residents of Redbury Porus in Manchester have been complaining for several weeks about the dust and noise pollution, among other issues from the road construction. They say they are anxiously awaiting the outcome of today's meeting between the road construction company and other stakeholders. The residents insist they will keep up their protest action until they're satisfied that their concerns are properly addressed. The St. Mary police seized a motor car on Monday that they suspect was being used to transport stolen goods. The police were conducting spot checks in Oracabessa when they ordered the vehicle to stop. 2 men and 5 goats were aboard. The police say the men were unable to give credible answers relating to the animals in their possession. The animals and the vehicle were subsequently seized and the men taken into custody. The police are now seeking the public's assistance to identify the animals which they suspect were stolen. In news overseas, another coronavirus variant that originated in Brazil has been identified in the United States. More from the CNN.
The tense quiet outside the small hospital in Iranduba, Brazil, can change so fast. An ambulance suddenly pulls up in front of the hospital as a woman inside is given CPR, medics desperately trying to save her. But a hospital source told us she died soon after this video was shot. The woman was the 3rd COVID patient to die here this morning alone. The overwhelmed hospital is a small example of a massive outbreak here in Brazil's northwest, its epicenter known as the gateway to the Amazon, the city of Manaus. The city of about 2 million is replete with scenes like this, patients packed into unsanitary hospitals with a startling lack of ventilators or even just oxygen. Recovery is a mirage. In what's been the city's deadliest month of the pandemic by far, many here are just simply waiting to die. This doctor says we've got 15 patients and there's 2 beds. It's difficult to say that we choose who lives and who dies, but we do try and save the ones with the best chance to live. Health officials at all levels have acknowledged shortcomings, and doctors and nurses are clearly doing their best with the little they have. But Manaus has been here before. In April and May last year, the healthcare system collapsed for the first time during the first COVID-19 wave. Some studies suggested up to 75% of Manaus got the virus. Thousands of newly dug graves pockmarked the city cemetery, but now even those aren't enough. So that's why the government is quickly building these so-called vertical graves. They're basically coffin-sized sections that will stack on top of one another, and they're doing it this way because they're running out of space. By the time this project is ultimately done, the government says they will have built 22,000 vertical graves to meet the expected demand. So many people got sick the first time, many here simply believed that herd immunity would prevent another round. Despite many warnings from experts that might not be true, Brazil's COVID skeptic president, Jair Bolsonaro, said there wouldn't be a second wave. Things opened up, life got back to normal, and then came a new COVID variant, P1, originating right here in Brazil, a kind of a perfect storm.
I'm usually not an alarmist about these kind of things, and I'm concerned about what we're seeing in Brazil right now.
A recent study in Manaus found 2/3 of recent infections are caused by the variant, prompting fears that this variant spreads faster.
To news and sports now, CEO of Cricket West Indies, Johnny Grave, has confirmed that West Indians competing in the Abu Dhabi T10 League this week will need to quarantine on their return to the region for the Super 50 over competition in Antigua. More from Simon Preston.
The Abu Dhabi T10 tournament is set to run from January 28 to February 6 in the United Arab Emirates, while the regional Super 50 bowls off on February 7 and runs until February 27. 14 of the 25 West Indians in the UAE are slated to return to the Caribbean for the Super 50. But according to CEO of Cricket West Indies Johnny Grave, some players could miss their opening game of the tournament. Where the Jamaica Scorpions are concerned, their opening encounter is on February 11, which gives time to Rovman Powell, Fabian Allen, Sheldon Cottrell and Brandon King to isolate on arrival in Antigua.
The T10 league players will fly back on the 7th, will undergo the same quarantine that all the players and support staff and TV crew are undertaking, which is 3 days of room isolation before being able to have restricted movement from day 4 as long as they test negatively before they depart with 2 tests and obviously then testing on arrival as well as testing on day 4. So hopefully we'll be in a position where all the players coming back from the T10 League will be able to, certainly from a Jamaican and Trinidad perspective, play in their opening games.
But for other franchises such as the Windward and Leeward Islands, their players would miss their opening encounters.
And the Windward Island players and Devon Thomas and the Leeward Islands will miss probably their first games, but be available for the rest of the tournament. So, it's one where we've, as I said before, we've worked hard to ensure that players can not only compete in the T10, but also, which is hugely important to us, competing in the Super 50 Cup.
And as planning continues to stage a regional 4-day championship this calendar year, Grave highlighted another event which CWI is hoping to stage soon.
And I'm sure if they happen successfully, we can look forward to a regional women's tournament and regional 4-day cricket also being played in the Caribbean around the Easter time.
Chris Gale, Kennar Lewis and Chadwick Walton are the other Jamaicans competing in the Abu Dhabi T10 League. Simon Preston reporting for TVJ Sports.
That's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.